That is a little technique that I learned from the Winning Women's Conference, which I was attending when dear Mahmoud Khalil was detained, I could say abducted from Columbia University, where I happen to be a graduate student myself. So, yeah, it's been a very emotional week. And that's not counting the fact that I had my thesis due, I had a horrible eye infection. Personal stuff aside, this is a violation of free speech. This is not what America claims to be. This is not my America. This is not making America great again. This is not making any place great again. This is fascism. And I do not use that word lightly, but this is a tactic suppressing free speech that is used in other countries that the US and the United Nations would call fascist countries or countries that have historically, at some point, been fascist. I can think of my own mother's country. My maternal side is from El Salvador. And yeah, disappearing somebody, that's a big part of Latin American fascist regimes. Oh, somebody saying something in a public forum politically that we don't like, time to get rid of them, time to kidnap them, time to, in some cases, rape them, kill them, threaten their families, take away their livelihoods, their dignity in so many ways. And that's what has been done to Mr. Khalil. His dignity, his power have been robbed of him. He should be allowed to express himself. Now, there are people who said, okay, but he uh, inspired violence. He was one of the agitators on campus. He was somebody at Columbia University who brought about hate. From everything I've seen, that's not true. From everything I have read, photos I've looked at, and I was on campus last year. It is worth saying I was on campus. I was there during the protest, not as somebody who was participating, and not because I don't think the students shouldn't protest. I wholeheartedly believe that they have the right to express themselves. They have the right to say, as Khalil did, we do not want war anywhere. Uh, yes, there is an argument about Gaza versus Israel for sure. That's definitely part of it. That's actually not the whole thing. And some people would say the bigger argument is that this is an anti-war movement, that war should be avoided everywhere, that there's no reason for all this violence, for mass killings, that people should learn diplomacy and put that into effect, that people should talk through their issues. When I went to Guatemala last summer to do research about the conflicts that took place in Central America in the 1970s and 80s, which, the oversimplification would be communism, no communism. Um, Something that really struck me looking at the archives was, and you see this throughout history, right? I'm just focusing on this one geographical area because it's one that I have a connection to, and it's also one that I don't think gets mentioned enough in US classrooms. But I was very struck by the photo documentation of student protests and of mass killings of people who had, in one way or another, spoken out against the government and or expressed some kind of opposition, right? Sometimes not even explicitly against the government, and ended up in mass graves, ended up killed, ended up on the street, or disappeared, like I was mentioning before. It was just photo after photo after photo. There were also photos of families who are wondering what happened to their loved ones. This is something that you see in Mexico a lot. All these mothers of the disappeared have had so many political outings and expressions, like coming out in public, talking about their disappeared loved ones, usually children. They're children, they're adults, but they're sons and daughters. I am just outraged that in this country where supposedly we are allowed to speak our minds, uh, this person who's here completely legally, Mr. Khalil, uh, is a green card holder, is married to a US citizen. Well, guess what? Legally, free speech also applies to green card holders. It applies to anybody who is in this country legally. They have the legal right to express their political ideas in a public way. It doesn't matter if they're immigrants or not, as long as they are here legally. Now, I have some issue with that because I think any human here, regardless of their legal status, documented or undocumented, should be allowed to express political opposition, political dissent, political ideas in general. I mean, why is it that we have Truth Social, right? We have this whole group of people who decided, oh, well, I'm being censored on these platforms, so now we have to go to this super right-wing thing. Um, yeah, it really should not matter what a person's legal status is. Because in order to encourage thought, I was going to say political thought, but really it's just thought, critical thinking, to have discussions about what's going on in this country and around the world, people have to feel that they can go to a public place and not face serious repercussions, like essentially getting kidnapped from their student housing, right? Um, I was reading today, I wasn't aware of this, that there was a Canadian, not Canadian, I'm sorry, an Indian student who self-deported to Canada. This is another graduate student, I believe, Ms. Shravani, who's in the architecture program at Columbia doing her PhD in urban studies, something along those lines. Doesn't matter. The real point is ICE came to her student apartment 3 times. Three. And I saw the email that our interim president at Columbia sent the student body, which was, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm heartbroken. That was the word that she used. I'm heartbroken that ICE is coming onto our campus, coming to our student housing. Yeah, but you allowed them to come onto campus. You allowed them to come to student housing. Okay, they have a warrant. But what I don't understand is that New York City is a sanctuary city. How come we have sanctuary spaces like schools and churches? Schools, I mean K through 12 schools, public schools, where ICE agents are not allowed. Those are considered, a church is literally sacred, right? But the K through 12 schools are also considered like these off limits, these sacred spaces where ICE is not allowed to just barge in and start taking undocumented children. So how come they can come onto a private university and try and take a student away? I mean, in the case of Khalil, they did. They succeeded. They took him to a detention center in Louisiana, of all places. Somebody I interviewed on the street the other day for this class video I had to make in Little Palestine and Bay Ridge. They call it Little Palestine because there's a big, mainly Palestinian, but also Syrian and other Middle Eastern folks who live there. But yeah, this man I interviewed on the street made a good point that they took Khalil to Louisiana because that's a place that doesn't have a pro-immigrant stance, right? There, it's not like, oh yeah, let's lock him up in New York where maybe he has a chance. No, let's take him to the deep South where things might be a little bit tougher for him, where he might have people who are not so sympathetic to him. So this Shrivana student, Ms. Shrivana, self-deported because she knew they were going to come get her, right? She apparently was home the first time that ICE knocked on her door. The second time she wasn't home, but her roommate was. And then her roommate, of course, like a good human, warned her, told her that they came when she was not home. And by the third time ICE came to the apartment, this is over the course of a couple days, I believe. It might have been that full week. I'd have to double check that. Um, yeah, she was already packed. She was gone. She was on her way or in Canada by the time they came knocking that third instance. Um, and good for her. You're just going to randomly revoke somebody's visa? This woman didn't even participate in the protests, apparent in a big way though, as Khalil did. Now, Khalil was not in the encampments, is what I have read, but he was a public face. I remember him being very much a figure last spring. You would see him photographed, and he wouldn't wear a mask. Now, recently, the administration had students do a little survey, this little bitch ass survey about safety on campus. That's how they branded it. And this was before Khalil was detained. This was a couple weeks before. And the first question on that survey was if we supported mask bans, how we would feel about them banning masks that were not for medical or religious purposes on campus. And the reason they asked that question was because, yeah, a lot of people who have participated in the protests, I mean, you saw this last spring. You've seen it this year. People would cover their faces. They would put on like the COVID masks, they would put on medical masks, or they would wrap scarves around their faces, wear like winter caps, those full-fledged things that just have a little space for your eyes. Um, yeah, people want to be anonymous. And this was before, even before Khalil was detained. They knew, oh, we have to protect ourselves. We have to protect our identities. Now, doxing was a concern last spring. It seems like it was the biggest deal at Harvard, not as much at Columbia. I can't explain why it was a bigger issue there. Maybe it honestly has something to do with the infrastructure of the campus. Like, yes, Columbia has the main part of the campus that's enclosed and now gated, locked from the public, but there are still plenty of buildings and even campuses that are not part of the Morningside campus. So it's not as open and certainly not as integrated into the city as NYU is. It does have the walls, the ivy, um, but it's more integrated than Harvard is. And I've been there, so I can say that. I can say that their school does feel more insulated and more like uh, a real enclosed campus. But yeah, I remember looking at that survey and immediately knowing that they're not asking this question about the masks because of COVID concerns. Some people actually thought, oh, well, this is because they don't want any hysteria about COVID. And you'll see that in some parts of the country, that there are explicit anti-masking rules in different public spaces. They don't want you to wear the mask for political reasons. They don't like what it represents, which is just like medical knowledge, general medical safety and prevention. Um, but you'll also hear we don't like that it scares some people. It makes them too nervous about COVID. I've heard about that in public school settings too, that some teachers are like, well, if we make the kids wear masks at times where it's not totally necessary, then they get too scared about COVID. It can paralyze them. What? What? Yeah, but I knew that this was about the doxing concerns. I didn't know. I didn't suspect, at least not seriously, that it was about anything related to Trump detaining students who had participated in the protests. And for him to say that Colombia didn't do enough to prevent anti-Semitism for anyone to say that is bullshit. It's just utter bullshit. I will say that I did see some hateful signs last year, signs that were anti-Zionist, which I don't think that's the worst thing. Things that were anti-Jewish in different ways. I remember that outside of the campus, not on the actual campus. But, there are people who would say, well, if you're against Israel, you're against Jews. I don't think that is the case at all. Um, I know plenty of Jews, including ones on Columbia's campus, who are not pro-Israel. And it should specify the Israeli government, right? Not about the Israeli people as a culture necessarily, but the government. We had this Fulbright scholar from Israel on campus last year. I mean, I'm sure there were more of them, but there was one that I knew, one that I interacted with. She was in a couple of my classes, and she she complained that nobody was listening to her, that nobody was asking how she felt after October 7th, right? And while I would agree that she definitely encountered some tense situations in the classroom where people didn't want to listen to anything she had to say. I also witnessed circumstances where people invited her to speak and she just didn't want to engage. So what, you only want to talk when it's on your terms. You only want to express yourself when it's on your terms. I have empathy. I can imagine. I mean, I think again about my mom, about her family, and how if you are from a country where there is active war, that is complex. I mean, I was born in 1988. My mom came to the United States in 1986, and she never moved back to El Salvador, and actually didn't even visit. There are other people of her generation who did move back, or did have some kind of connection. Um, but yeah, there is this common pattern of people of her generation just never looking back, right? But she was constantly homesick and she still monitored the news. She still, of course, it was Spanish language news. It was Latin American news that was reporting on what was going on there. When I was a kid, you didn't see major coverage of it. Um, and certainly nuanced coverage of the Civil War in El Salvador in media, in mass US media when I was growing up. But yeah, she did pay attention. I think it's natural to feel for when your country is going through war because war is a horrible thing. And that is the point that I strongly believe in pacifism. I strongly believe in any kind of anti-war movement. I don't see a reason for war to happen ever. And I think for all of the students peacefully protesting the war and expressing those same ideas, they're totally within their right. And I don't care if they are US citizens, if they are permanent residents, if they're here on a student visa, if they're undocumented, I don't care. That is just morally, I don't I think this is something that transcends politics. It transcends religion, or at least it should. That we should not be killing each other. Okay, cases of self-defense, I can see where that makes sense, but generally speaking, we should not be killing each other. Life is short enough as it is, and life is very precious. Uh, for Trump to say that this is only the beginning, that's the phrase that I've been seeing, the quote I've been seeing, that this is only the beginning of what's to come on college campuses. God, I hope that's not true, because that is certainly fascism. Every fascist regime comes after universities first. They come after intellectuals first. They come after the student protesters. They come after the professors who are teaching opposition movements and oppositional ideas in the classroom or signing readings that oppose whatever. Um, but here's the thing, as somebody who's at Columbia and as somebody who went to the City College of New York, which is also known as the poor man's Harvard, and as a Marxist institution, it had its roots in Marxism. It was the first free college in the United States. Um, Good professors do not just have you read things that align with how they think. Good professors don't just have you watch and discuss things that are in line with how they think. They do challenge you and they assign you all kinds of readings and documentaries and speaker events, and they are trying to get you to become a critical thinker. Now, critical thinking develops through exposure to different ideas. You really cannot just live in a vacuum. You really can't just be surrounded by the same people all the time. I wish that on campus they had had more dialogue. Um, I know that they automatically subscribed all of us to the Institute for Israeli Studies, their newsletter on campus. I would have to go back and check exactly when that happened, but I believe it was in the spring semester last year because there were Jewish students who were complaining that they weren't being heard enough on campus. Um, yeah, I think it's important to have cross-cultural communication, cross-cultural dialogue. It's kind of weird to just put me on a mailing list. Please don't do that. My email address is sacred. I already get too many unwanted emails. But the sentiment, I get. Let's have different kinds of ideas on campus. Um, I, yeah, I really do not remember feeling like, oh, this is a very anti-Jewish environment. How can it be when so many Jewish students were involved in the protests? It doesn't, it just does not make any sense. I do wonder who they're going to come after next, if they're just going to pick off these these international students one by one. If they do have some list, if they have been going through social media, I'm sure. I mean, that's what they said at the journalism school in this town hall, that was written about in the New York Times, and there was some drama in our big What's Up group chat because there was a student, one of our students, who attended that town hall and then leaks information about the town hall to the New York Times. And there were people who said, well, that meeting was off the record. How could you do that? I'm cynical, and anytime you have a few hundred people get together, I don't believe it's possible to have a truly safe space off the record kind of environment. But also, to my recollection, in the email communication, there was nothing that said this is off the record. I didn't attend that event, but from what I've heard at the beginning of the event, nobody speaking said this is off the record. Hey, and all, but also off the record technically is an agreement. It's not just one person saying this is off the record. Really, it's supposed to be the journalist and whatever party who both say, yes, this is off the record. But in that meeting, Dean Cobb, one of the, like corn on the cob, one of the journalism deans said, we cannot protect you. That was the quote in the New York Times. And he, I believe, tweeted about it, put it somewhere publicly that, yeah, that is what he said, but it was taken out of context. It was an hour and a half long meeting, uh, blah, blah, blah. I think there was some covering of his ass that might have been taking place, to be honest. Um, but yeah, it is true that we can't expect the deans and professors to protect us. I know that there's been advice that we should put our social media on private or uh, if we keep it public, because yeah, if you're a journalist, you need to have a public presence. It's really hard not to in this day and age. Sources depend on you. They need to have an easy way to contact you. And also, you want readers and viewers to be able to find you so they can read your stories, watch your videos. Um, they've also advised that we not post anything political on our social media. Now, this might be naive. I feel relatively safe. And I don't feel like I'm the first to go, you know? But to my point earlier, I do wonder how they're going to prioritize abducting and disappearing other students. I mean, at what point are they going to start removing US citizens from campus? Or are they going to start arresting them? They did arrest US citizens last spring. Most, if I don't think it was all, I would have to double check this. Most of those charges were dropped. But now we're seeing the threat of, oh, some of those students might have their degrees revoked. Revoked? I don't care who's paying it. If it's your parents, if it's a scholarship organization, uh, if it's your own personal savings, this school costs $100,000 a year. If your degree gets revoked, you or whoever paid for your schooling needs to get a refund. If you did your 4 year undergrad, or you did your 1 to 3 years master's, or your 3 to 7 years PhD, and then for them to say, oh, well, you participated in a protest. Oh, you had some social media that was anti-Semitic, right? Just because it wasn't like rah rah Israel. Yeah, that should not be allowed. I mean, my first concern is going to be about getting arrested, somebody getting thrown in jail, or somebody getting thrown out of this country, deported, right? I think those are bigger issues. It still must suck, and it's still definitely not ethical to just for them to revoke your degree because you expressed yourself, because you use some critical thinking, which is what you are supposed to learn from a college. Yeah, Not okay. All right. Well, that is all the time that I have now, but thanks for listening. It's been, like I said, an exhausting week.